It's the Robert Saviola Show, sponsored by Buffalo Hypnosis. And now, from the beautiful studios of WBEN, here's Robert.
Hello, welcome to the Robert Saviola Show. My name is Eric Polanski. Today I have a special guest. With me today is John Kane. John has a show, Let's Talk Native, on KB 1520 AM. That can be heard on Sunday evenings from 9 to 11 p.m. John's website is letstalknativepride.blogspot.com. His column appears in the Brainstream Media News monthly newspaper. It's an alternative paper here in Buffalo and Western New York. He's been a numerous guest in appearances on TV and radio. I just came back from doing a show in New York City. He's probably the most recognized voice speaking on behalf of natives. So welcome to the Robert Saviola Show, John. How are you doing?
Thanks for having me come on. Again, this is it's neat to come here and be a guest on an intercom station rather than being a host. So, but I appreciate the opportunity to come on.
Well, my pleasure. Well, basically, instead today of asking questions, you'll be answering some. So basically, I'd like to, we have a few minutes left here. As far as you getting into radio and you becoming an advocate and even an activist, how did this all begin for you?
Well, I guess where it became more of a dominating part of what I do was back in '97 when we were in the throes of a tax battle during the Pataki administration. I was actually a part of the First Nations dialogue team, and so myself with four other individuals, we went from territory to territory. We did some media events. I was writing quite a few letters to the editor, and it was. And I'd like to think that the efforts that we made in '97 played a big role in George Pataki flat out doing a 180 on the whole tax issue. When he came to Western New York and did a press conference at the Erie County Historical Society, he made a point to let us know that he was coming and that he had something to say that we were probably going to like. We were very skeptical. I mean, even as he walked by us and said, "It's good to see you. You're going to like what I have to say." There were plenty of us who were very cynical, and he took to the podium and said that as the executive of New York State, he was no longer going to pursue trying to collect taxes or impose New York State's regulations as it related to the taxing of tobacco and gas on the native peoples in New York State. And he basically stuck to that word through the remainder of his tenure as the governor of the state of New York. He vetoed every attempt, except for the final one, to try to do anything that was going to change the relationship as it related to our economies and our territories. So,
well, since 1997, a lot has happened. How is it gone as far as progress is concerned with keeping sovereignty to the natives? Any issues that, I remember tires were being burnt, and that was over the same issue, wasn't it?
Well, in '97, that was actually the second go-around. Just recently, the Senecas in particular were commemorating the 20th anniversary of the first time things had gone this way, which was in '92, obviously. So in '97, things flared up again. But you know what happens is we go through this, what we call a learning curve, where it's not us learning, where we've got to teach a new governor that comes into Albany. And Mario Cuomo was one of those guys that took an aggressive stance at points, and we pushed back and we kind of turned things. When George Pataki came in, it was the same thing. And again, it almost is, I almost think, regardless or in spite of whomever, whatever party is in power. And we've actually, when you ask about the status now, we're actually probably have the worst relationship, broad-based relationship with the state of New York than we've ever had. And this is during a Democratic governorship. Things started turning south both when Spitzer got elected. Patterson was not very willing to engage us in much of a conversation. And now you've got a New York State governor riding on a huge wave of popularity who is really taking some pretty strong stands against us, including some of the recent stuff where he's actually trying to leverage the fact that they violated the Seneca Nations Gaming Compact, and so they won't pay the money to the state that the state was hoping to get. And he's using that as a reason for not even fixing the roads that go through our territory. So now it actually goes into a public safety issue. So that's how bad the relationship between the current governor of the state of New York and Native people is.
Well, we're with John Kane from Let's Talk Native. You can reach him at letstalknativepride.blogspot.com. Is that correct, John?
Yeah, and you know, bottom line is, I know that's kind of a long URL. If you just search Native Pride, if you go to Google and search Native Pride, I'll be the first entry that comes up.
Beautiful. And we'll be right back on the Robert Saviola Show. Thank you. The show. My name is Art Kolansky, and I have in studio John Kane. John, thank you for coming in again.
Well, thanks for having me.
You can reach John at Let's Talk Native or letstalknativepride.blogspot.com.
I also have a group page on Facebook, which is Let's Talk Native with John Kane, and I encourage people to check it out, request to be added to the group page. I'm trying to grow it out. I've got about 1,200 people or something like that on that group page now. So anybody who is on Facebook, by all means, look for me there. I do a lot of links, both to my blog, to other appearances, and I add a lot of links to other Native issues. So sometimes stuff that's not even covered on my show or on my blog, I also get a chance to address sometimes on my Facebook group page as well.
Okay, beautiful. Well, you know, one of the good things about having you in the studio is that we both have some things in common being in New York State here. You were mentioning earlier that New York is really kind of not friendly, not Native friendly, and they're really not friendly to any one of us here.
Well, and it's not the local politicians necessarily. And one of the things that I really want to impress upon Western New York is that most of our issues aren't necessarily Native issues against New York State. It's regional issues, and I think the good folks of Western New York, who by and large support a lot of our issues, whether it's our issues on tobacco or gaming or anything else. This is really a regional conflict. It's us against Albany a lot of times, and frankly, it's us against Albany and the New York City interests. And I think that we're talking about public safety. We're talking about roads being maintained. These aren't Indian roads.
Right. Yes.
These are roads that the state in their history wanted to push through our territory, so non-Native people could have access. So we have public safety issues. We have financial issues. We have issues where money is being sucked out of a region that is already hard hit in Western New York. And whether it's coming out of the city of Buffalo or off the Cattaraugus Indian Reservation, it is still sucking money out of a region, out of an economy that really depends on some of that fare between people in a local region. Economies aren't global. Economies are local, and this is one of those things that people are going to become more and more aware of as things can degrade at the global level, so to speak. Especially,
yeah, with the gas prices, for example, and to get a semi from one side to the other is it's not as simple as it used to be. Prices skyrocket, and the dollar can't keep up. Basically.
You know, one of the things that always amazes me, and every time I go to New York, I can't help but notice this. For all of the noise about us selling cheap gas or cheap this or cheap that, when you drive to New York, as soon as you cross from New York State into New Jersey, the gas prices drop 60 cents a gallon. Nobody ever talks about parity or how many New York State residents fill up their tanks in New Jersey, and yet you'll still have people in Albany that say, "Oh, it's not right that New York State residents will shop on an Indian reservation to save taxes." And yet, the amount of revenue leakage that is lost from New York State to surrounding states is something that none of them will ever discuss.
Well, they seem to be friends with New Jersey and not so friendly with the reservations.
Well, it's not even just about being friends with New Jersey. It's just that it's easier to scapegoat somebody that you can pigeonhole like Native people rather than trying to scapegoat an entire state that you may or may not have to have open borders for that commerce.
Well, you were also involved in some discussion. One of your blogs that you wrote was on the UN and the treaty, and basically now the way I understand it is, what is this treaty about? Because you were not privy to it. So
Well, I'm not exactly sure what you're talking about. I guess a couple things happening with the UN. One of the things that has been pushed through is this UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, which is it's kind of a tepid document anyway. It doesn't really address things in a hard-hitting way. And an example of that is, even though the U.S. and Canada were so reluctant to even sign on to this thing, there were countries like Great Britain that signed on to it, and yet, in spite of the fact that they've signed on to such a document, they still denied the Iroquois nationals to go play and honor their passport. So even things like travel documents, trade and commerce, some of the basic things that the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People is supposed to address, it always gets kind of whitewashed into something. I mean, when in the last summer, this past summer, when they were talking about UN issues, they talked about a 500-year-old Christian discovery doctrine that is unraveling on its own, and they talked about access to sacred sites. How you can reduce Native issues to those two things when we are still in the throes of trying to resist state policies and federal policies that are really geared towards trying to assimilate our commerce into their systems, and you can't look at assimilation as just some sort of lukewarm policy that is geared to try to rein us in. It still fits in within the international definitions of genocide when you are essentially trying to make a people cease to exist as autonomously or distinctly.
Well, yeah, I think some of us in Western New York feel your pain to some degree, not to the point that our history is the same, but to the point where we're seeing the tyranny or the rules from on top coming down, and they're not just landing on natives; they're landing on regular.
Well, I've always expressed the opinion that the Native people can be regarded in many ways as the canary in the coal mine. If something's going to happen to us, it may happen to us first. But the people that are on the lower rungs of society, in the social classes of the U.S., are going to be imposed upon every bit the same way that we are.
Well, let's take, for example, gun laws. We know UN is going to would like to pass a treaty to make all of the nations susceptible to the law, which says civilians cannot own guns.
Well, and that's really never going to happen. First off, the United States will always resist some sort of international document that's going to impose a specific right, and that's even evidence on how even the United States and Canada's position with the UN DRIP, for instance, they said they could embrace the aspirations of the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples as long as it didn't interfere with their constitution, their laws, and that kind of stuff. So I don't see the United States, and this isn't even necessarily about right wing or left wing on the gun issues. From a Native perspective, trust me, they've been trying to disarm us for 400 years. So we have a little different view on gun rights and that kind of thing as it relates to our ability to defend ourselves. As far as how it fits into the U.S. Constitution and the rights for people to bear arms. I think people have to both be responsible about what they're doing, and every one of these crackpots who goes in and shoots up a bunch of people and that kind of thing, it always throws this issue into the forefront, and so it's difficult. I think at the end of the day, everything comes down to a simple thing. It has to do with responsibility, and I think when we let a few individuals or some staged event create a scenario that allows somebody to somehow impose federal regulations or government regulations on the broad-based population, I think everybody has to be aware of that stuff and make sure that. I mean, when I think about how 9/11 has been used to impose all kinds of government regulations on civil liberties. I mean, we get hit with that all the time because of our territories being close to borders and that kind of thing, Akwesasne in particular. Sure. We constantly hear this post 9/11 world thing thrown at us every time we get into, even when it comes to issues like demonstrating on the Thruway. We've had people say, "Oh, geez, you don't want to go down the Thruway. They're going to open up a can of Patriot Act on your butt," and And of course, I'm of the mind to say, "All right, bring it on," then, because I take the attitude that the first time anybody tries to cite us as terrorists for our own acts of civil disobedience, or the first time somebody tries to use a Patriot Act against us, I think that they'll risk weakening their position on the whole Patriot Act, and it'll unravel.
Well, yeah. Hopefully, people can see that it's all just people here. We're all people, whether you live here or whether you live there. That if it's happening to somebody, it's happening to all of us here.
Well, and when it comes to this whole terrorism thing, I always suggest somebody look at the orders that came from George Washington to General Sullivan when they came out and did the Sullivan campaigns against the Senecas. It is a clear indication of George Washington using terrorism against that. He uses the word. The word is in his orders. He says it is important that we inflict a terror upon the Seneca people. I mean, nobody likes to associate George Washington with being a terrorist, but when the use of terror is a strategy by the first president of the United States, or that's undeniable when it's documented.
Well, John, thank you for joining us today. Hopefully we can do this again. Look at John's at WWKB 1520 AM on Sunday nights from 9 to 11 p.m. His show, Let's Talk Native. John Kane, thank you very much, my friend.
Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. We're on the Robert Saviola Show, WBEN Radio 930. Thank you. Back to the Robert Saviola Show. This is Eric Polanski. John Kane has decided to stay with us in the studio, and he will be talking with Robert in about 5 minutes. Robert, how are you? You there?
Excellent. Today I have a couple of things I want to talk about. I think these are very paramount and what should be on our minds right now, especially with the UN now sending over that small arms treaty that Obama's planning on signing. And we're looking at the UN troops and other troops coming into our country, going door to door to confiscate weapons. I recently saw a lot of footage about Katrina and what happened during that hurricane in New Orleans. And what I saw was quite disturbing. It was kind of like a trial run on confiscating weapons from Americans. And what they did was they went to high and dry places in New Orleans. We're talking about places that were nowhere near the flooding, places where there were very wealthy homes, very wealthy people, and they were not in danger. It was just like a nice sunny day for them, nothing going on as far as when the troops hit the ground. So what they did is they went to these homes and they jackbooted the doors open while they're saying, is anybody in here needing any assistance? And then what they did is they forcefully took all the weapons anybody had in the house, whether they were legal or not. Some people were very well armed because they were protecting their homes. Well, these troops came in and took all those weapons and told them they weren't going to be able to protect their homes. They're not allowed to have weapons. And this was a dry run. They showed on film an old woman. I'm talking, she had to be in her 70s or 80s. And here she is with a little handgun to protect herself. Well, they slapped her in the face, put her on the ground, kicked her, and punched her as they took away her little handgun, and she wasn't resisting or doing anything wrong. Now, why I'm bringing this up is because a lot of people are concerned of what's going to happen in this nation very shortly. And we need to know whether or not the sheriffs and the police are going to be on our side, or are they going to be the ones also jacking the doors in. And it's very disturbing. Now, my question, before I go any further, to John, our guest, is for the American Indians, the Native Americans in this country. Will you stand with everybody else in defending our rights to have guns? Because I see now all Americans standing together to fight this, because this is coming at us, and it's going to happen. If this election doesn't change, this small arms treaty doesn't change, this is going to happen. They're going to come. If you don't give them the guns, they're going to take the guns at the point of death. They'll kill you to get them, or you're going to be locked up in jail. Now, for instance, the American Indians on the reservations, do you have any plans? How are you going to combat something like this?
Well, we've been combating the efforts from the federal government and to a lesser extent state governments in trying to disarm us for 4 centuries. So this isn't anything new for us. But one thing I got to make clear: we aren't Americans. You know, we are our sovereign nation. So in as many places as we really do line up with some of the concerns that the American citizenry has, we oftentimes find ourselves in a uniquely
independent position when it comes to how we have to battle for issues about our rights to defend ourselves. And having said that, I think that many Native people do agree with the ability to defend ourselves, and I think we agree with many of the American citizens as it relates to a lot of those issues. So I can't honestly say that you'll see an outpouring of Native people rushing to stand side by side with Americans on the firearms issue, at least not physically standing, because we have our own issues with just trying to defend our own territory. So I think we line up philosophically, but not necessarily physically when it comes to that battle.
What's going to happen is they're going to come, and it's not going to be like in the past. We're talking air support. We're talking tanks. We're talking people with heavily armed we're talking automatic machine guns, not semi-automatic machine guns. They've already GPSed the doors in the United States. This is something that they want to take place. They want every gun out of the hands of the American citizen. Of course, that'll never happen. The criminals will still be able to get guns, and they'll still have them. But the whole point is to control a nation. And the strongest nation in the world as far as being armed as the United States, because millions of hunters and American Indians, we all have them. I'm thinking that we might see a cowboy and Indian kind of standoff against the rest of the world protecting this nation from our own administration. And the sad part about it here is that we have our own government now turning against us. And they're turning against us where people that are in the military are second-guessing and questioning themselves. The person that was in Katrina was only like 21 years old at the time and just doing orders. But now that it's been a few years gone by, he's a little older, he's questioning everything he's done, wondering if he's done the right thing. My concern is, will there be people in the military, in the police force, that will stand against this and side with the citizens of the United States? Because even if they stand with the governments disarming us, they too are going to be slaves of this government. It's just a matter of time.
Well, you get into the whole debate when it comes to local authority versus national authority, and I've had a couple of callers on my show that suggest when it comes to the sheriffs, they actually have more supreme physical authority over a lot of these issues within the states than the federal authorities do. So you pose an interesting question, and it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out when you do end up having especially if there does come to a point where you have some sort of armed force that is under the command of something like the UN, as opposed to even the National Guard or the U.S. military. I think it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. But again, I will say from a Native perspective, we think that'll be a hard battle for somebody to come into Indian country. And one of the examples I can't help but raise, is back in February, 100 armed military or armed federal agents, they didn't dare go into someplace like Seneca Nation territories like Cattaraugus or Allegheny or Mohawk territory. They picked the most isolated and the most vulnerable Native territory to go to, and they went to Tonawanda, and they went in and out of there. They tried to get in there, and they were sounding off how many minutes. They were trying to get in and out of there 20 minutes because they did not want to get pigeonholed, even in a community that only has 500 people living there.
Well, Robert, if I could interrupt for a second, this is a reason we would like to bring Sheriff Mack to town sometime later in the summer or in the fall. Sheriff Mack would love to talk with sheriffs specifically, the sheriff's department, the deputies, law enforcement, basically oath keepers is the issue at hand here, and reminding these people that take oaths that they need to keep the oath, because the oath is to the people, to protect the people and not the corporation.
We're looking at a time in our lives that we've never seen before. And I agree with John when he says it's going to be a lot tougher than they think. I do agree with that. But I'm also watching how right now we don't raise our own kids. The government does. If they want your child out of your home for any reason, they just come and take the child of the night. If you resist, they will arrest you, and they will kill you to get that child out of the home. So when it comes to gun confiscation, you're going to see the same thing. You're going to see people's doors jackbooted open, and they're going to be searching for weapons. If you don't declare those weapons and give them to them voluntarily, and they search and they find them, they're going to put you in jail. And if you try to defend yourself against them doing that, will kill you. Now, they're going to have bulletproof vests and helmets and all the gear, and there you are standing with your little semi-automatic. It's going to be tough for you to defend. So that's why I think right now that the sheriffs need to voluntarily deputize at least 10,000 people in every state, which means a 500,000 strong army. And I also think that these people need to start weaponing up and becoming secure in their own homes, because right now you're not allowed to defend yourself in your own home. I mean, you're guilty to proven innocent in this country. It's been that way for at least 20 years, and I don't see anything changing in the near future.
Well, if anyone would like to try to make a change, we could give them the free-group.com website. That would be a good start, the way to change the tide here as far as the way we're going towards a federal national government that's accountable to the United Nations. As far as the natives are concerned, I mean, they're facing the same battles that we are, and that's why it's really good to have John on as a guest today. Robert?
Well, it's all. I'd like to chime in a little bit again. Doing shows like this and doing shows like mine are very important, because we need to make people aware and not allow media blackouts. I think back to the 1990s when Canada was trying to go bull rush the Mohawks in Oka and in Ganawage. There was a media blackout. 60 Minutes and some of these places wouldn't even carry a story on the Oka issue. We live in a time now where it's very, very difficult to stop the information flow, and so it's not just shows like these, but it's Twitter, it's Facebook, it's all of this social media. I think that's the other thing that I don't think the powers that be are understanding, is that they're going to have a hard time controlling the message as well.
Well, everybody, thank you for listening to the Robert Saviola Show on WBEN Radio 930. Robert, want to sign off?
God bless each and every one of you. See you next week.
Amen. God bless.
Thanks.
You and I have a rendezvous with destiny.